Hi, my name's Madeline. Nobody from my family came to my wedding. Not because they were sick. Not because they couldn't afford it. They chose not to come. And the worst part? They smiled about it. They told people I was too much, too needy, and that I'd ruin the mood. But months later, they got a text from the mayor. And suddenly, they all wanted a seat at my table. Too bad the table had already been cleared. And the whole city was watching. The sky was painfully perfect that morning. Not a cloud dared interrupt the blue above, and a soft Texas breeze nudged the ivory chiffon of my dress as I stood beneath the oak tree we chose together. Everything looked like a dream. The flowers, I arranged them myself the night before. Hydrangeas and dahlias, just like the ones Mom used to keep in her garden. The playlist I'd spent weeks building played softly in the background, every track tied to a memory we once shared. The chairs on my side of the aisle stayed empty. Every single one. The officiant leaned toward me, voice low but clear, "Do we still go ahead?" I nodded. His voice cracked just slightly when he began, and I could feel the curious stares from the groom's side. His aunt gave me a soft smile. Someone whispered, maybe her family got stuck in traffic. Another one said, that's a lot of no-shows. But I smiled. For every photo, every toast, I smiled like my heart wasn't breaking in real time. I smiled as the camera clicked and captured a moment meant to be joy, framed forever in a lie. Later, at the reception, I found myself staring at my reflection in the champagne glass. Maybe I expected too much. Maybe this was always going to happen. I was always the quiet one. The peacekeeper. The kid who gave up her turn so others didn't cry. The one who never made a fuss, because, you're so good at being okay, sweetheart. I used to think that was love. Now, I'm not sure what it was. Did I not matter enough? Was this my fault? I thought of how often I canceled things last minute. Maybe they thought I'd call off the wedding too. Maybe they didn't believe I'd follow through, just like every time before, when I tried to stand up for myself. Was my RSVP email too cold? Did I say something wrong at Thanksgiving? Was it because I didn't call Dad back last month? My brain spun in circles, trying to solve a puzzle made of silence. I remembered turning 17. No party, no calls. A neighbor dropped off cookies and said, "Didn't realize it was your birthday." That quiet cut deeper than any insult. This felt the same, just with more flowers. Silence hurts more than screaming ever could. Just as the first dance finished, my phone buzzed. Then again. And again. Flight was cancelled. So sorry. Feeling under the weather, next time. Car broke down. Hope it went great. One message read, wait, was it today? Thought it was next weekend lol. As if I'd just opened a smoothie bar, not married the love of my life. I held the phone tight. My new husband glanced over. Everything okay? I lied. Just vendors confirming stuff. Then I saw her name. My older sister. Her message, don't be dramatic. It's not the end of the world. I stared at those words. Cold, clinical, like I was being ridiculous. Like my heart hadn't just shattered while they all sipped coffee or watched reruns from their couches. The gap between what I felt and how they saw it, it was a canyon I'd fallen into, and no one noticed I was gone. His mother noticed, though. She leaned in, placed a gentle hand on my back, and whispered, some people never deserve your light, sweetie. They tried to fill the void. His cousin stepped in for family photos, standing where my brother should have been. One of his nieces linked her arm with mine and said, you look like a princess. But I wasn't a princess. I was a placeholder. From behind me, I caught someone murmuring, maybe she eloped before and didn't invite them this time. And just like that, I couldn't breathe. I slipped away. A little boy with jelly on his cheek tugged my skirt. Why didn't your mommy come? He asked. I don't know, I whispered. I really don't. The bathroom was too bright. Too white. I locked the stall and sat down, then stood up again just to do something with my hands. I looked in the mirror. My makeup was fine. Perfect, actually. I looked like a woman in control. But inside? I was a battlefield. I stared hard and whispered, you are not their broken leftover. You are your own damn woman. Back in the bridal suite, the music felt distant. I closed the door behind me and sat for a minute in the quiet. That's when my phone buzzed again. It was a number I barely recognized, my cousin Elise. We hadn't spoken in years. Her message read, "Do they even know who your husband's dad is?" Then another, "Wait, are they even aware who the mayor is?" I froze. The phone slipped slightly in my grip. They didn't know. They had no idea who I married. No clue who his family was. I stared at the screen, my heart beginning to beat in a new rhythm. Not pain this time. Something else. Something sharper. I whispered, "They don't know, do they?" And for the first time that day, I didn't feel small. I felt something start to shift. A plan. A way forward. I held the phone tighter. We got home late the next morning. The apartment was too quiet. My heels clicked against the hardwood, echoing like it was mocking the celebration that wasn't. The living room was cluttered with unopened wedding gifts, ribbons barely hanging on, name tags from his side, his friends, his mentors. Not a single box from my family. I stared at the table like something would appear if I blinked hard enough. But all I saw was absence, neatly wrapped in silence. "Want me to call them?" he asked gently, watching me from the kitchen. "No," I said without turning. "They made their choice." I sat down, reached for a box with his aunt's handwriting on it. I peeled the tape slowly. Inside was a photo of our ceremony, me standing alone on my side, surrounded on his. The frame had a note slipped behind the glass. It read, "Family isn't blood. It's who shows up." That line, simple as it was, stuck like a splinter under my skin. I walked to the kitchen and stood there, quiet, my hand resting on the counter, replaying those words over and over. Family isn't blood. Out of habit, I opened my phone. The group chat titled, "Fam Bam Red Heart," was active, hundreds of messages. "Aunt Tricia, can you believe Boomer is 10 today?" Boomer, my brother's dog. Someone else, "He's still got the same grumpy face lol." Cousin Mel, "I remember when we first got him from the shelter, time flies." I stared at it for a long minute. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I typed, "You all really skipped my wedding for this?" Then I erased it. I stared again. Then I just sent the eye emoji. Nothing. No reply. No reaction. The stream of messages continued, like I wasn't even there. I scrolled up, back through the months, past the date I sent the invitation. No one had even said congratulations. Not a single one. It wasn't like they forgot. It was like I didn't exist. And it wasn't the first time. I remember one summer, years ago. A family barbecue back in Houston. Everyone was there, lawn chairs, cornhole, cheap beer, potato salad that no one really liked but always made. I walked up to my dad, plate in hand. He was talking to his coworker and turned to introduce me. "And this is he paused. "The baby one, right?" Someone behind me chimed in, "You mean the one that cries too much?" Laughter erupted. I smiled too. That's what you do when you're the youngest. You laugh along or risk being called sensitive, dramatic, too much. But inside, I froze. When you're ignored long enough, you begin to doubt your own presence. Back in the kitchen now, I opened my laptop. I searched my email, went to the sent folder. There it was, the wedding invitation. I'd spent hours on it. I'd written personal notes for each person. I'd made it warm, welcoming, genuine. I wanted them to feel loved, to feel chosen. I clicked on the tracking receipt. Unread. All of them. No one had opened it. It wasn't a miscommunication. It wasn't lost in spam. It was deliberate. My throat tightened, but the tears stayed put. "Not today," I muttered. I clicked another message from my sister. It was a screenshot of a calendar. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then it hit me. Bright pink lettering across the Saturday of my wedding. Amber's baby shower 2 p.m. at Jen's. They didn't forget. They chose. They picked streamers and finger sandwiches over my vows. Cupcakes over commitment. I printed the screenshot and pinned it to the fridge. A yellow smiley face magnet held it in place. I stared at it for a long while, my arms crossed. They chose cupcakes over vows. That's not ignorance. That's intent. I heard him walk in behind me. His arms wrapped around my waist. "You okay?" I leaned back slightly, just enough to feel the warmth but not enough to sink in. "Just tired," I said. He kissed my temple and walked away, heading to the bedroom. And once he was gone, I turned back to the fridge. I whispered, "But they will learn. They will remember me." I opened my laptop again. The screen glowed softly in the dim kitchen. In the search bar, I typed, "Political connections in Austin, mayor family ties." And I started reading. The music had long faded into low murmurs, the clinking of glassware, and the occasional burst of laughter from inside the reception tent. I stepped outside into the humid North Carolina night, just beyond the flickering lights of the venue. My heels sank slightly into the soft lawn as I moved toward the edge of the trees. My dress still looked pristine, like I hadn't just been abandoned by half of the people who were supposed to love me. Behind me, the celebration carried on. I heard someone raise a toast. It was probably his uncle. He liked the sound of his own voice. The chairs marked "Bride's Family" were still lined up neatly, untouched, like a joke someone forgot to clean up. I stared at them too long. The mayor's limousine idled quietly in the distance. Its presence felt wrong. No one else seemed to notice, or maybe they just didn't care. Either way, it hummed like a secret waiting to spill. I overheard two women whispering by the bar. "She must have gone ahead without them." "They probably had their reasons," the other replied. "Families can be complicated." Complicated. That word again. My phone buzzed. A message from the florist. "Want us to collect the extra arrangements Monday morning?" Extra arrangements. All of them were extra now. I turned off the screen, walked toward the shadows between two oak trees, and stood there for a while, letting the breeze move through my hair. I whispered to no one in particular, "They think I didn't notice. They think silence means weakness." But I remembered everything. I remembered being 12. It was a backyard barbecue behind our old house. Same trees, same garden furniture dragged out for the occasion. I stood beside my sister while adults hollered for beers and ribs. Dad had waved someone over and said, "And this is her, the little one." Not my name. Just, "the little one." And someone, a neighbor or maybe a cousin, laughed and said, "You mean the one that cries too much?" Everyone laughed. I laughed too. Because I was trained to. Because that's what keeps the mood light. Later that day, I found a small bird-shaped trinket by the back steps and kept it. No one else wanted it. It fit in my palm. I carried it in my pocket the rest of that summer, like proof I'd been there. You don't vanish when they stop seeing you. You disappear when you stop reminding them you were ever there. That memory stayed with me longer than anyone realized. Longer than I realized. Now, back in the bridal suite the next morning, I had my laptop open. Sunlight crept in through sheer curtains. The room smelled like roses and leftover cake. I checked the email folder again. Every invite I'd sent to my family had tracking on it. I clicked each one by one. Invite opened, 0 times. Every single one. I opened the family chat again. Same routine. My cousin had posted about winning second place in some golf tournament. My sister shared photos from her engagement shoot, captioned with hearts and hashtags. And there, on the screenshot I took of our shared calendar, plain as daylight. Smith baby shower, Saturday, 2 p.m. Same day, same hour. I stared at it until my eyes burned. They didn't miss it. They didn't forget. They traded it. Cupcakes for vows. Diaper cakes over wedding cakes. I sat back, let the breath escape me. Not a sigh. Not quite. They made a choice. I didn't throw my laptop. I didn't scream. That would have given them too much credit. Instead, I archived everything: emails, messages, screenshots, receipts. I created a folder and named it what they'd never call me, Worthy. Then I forwarded the email metadata to someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year, Marla. My old campaign mentor from Austin. She used to say, "Power loves its shadows. Bring it into the light." And that's exactly what I planned to do. I turned to Keaton, who was folding the suit jacket he wore last night. "This isn't about anger," I told him. "It's about proof." He looked at me for a long second, then nodded. "I've got your back. All the way." I closed the laptop. That's when it came. Ding, a new notification lit up my screen. Location shared. City Hall, 2 p.m. Attached was a contact name I'd saved months ago and forgotten. The mayor. I stared at it, breath caught halfway in my chest. No more shadows. The drive back from the venue felt wrong in every way. The jazz stations had been replaced by an old country song playing the line, "What's broken often stays hidden." I pulled over on River Road, the headlights casting long shadows across the grass, and realized how hollow the night had become. My wedding gown lay in the backseat, slightly rumpled. The humid air pressed against me like a memory I couldn't shake. Then the phone buzzed. The sender's number didn't look familiar. I glanced at the screen from the corner of my eye. "Do you know who the mayor is?" I stiffened. My breath caught. I turned off the engine and parked under a street lamp. I opened the thread. It wasn't just one message, it was a chain. "From the mayor's office. We received your invitation. Honored to attend. Looking forward to seeing you." My head spun. The chairs I watched stay empty, the cards that never arrived. This wasn't oversight. It was strategy. The next morning I walked into City Hall, still wearing my cuffed sleeves and the knot of the tie I peeled off only a few hours before. I hadn't meant to come here this early. The meeting with my firm's contacts was set for noon. But something drew me in, an underlying hum of power and expectation. And then the mayor appeared. He stepped out of his limousine, the flash of cameras catching the morning light, and waved at me by name. "Nova Mabrix, congratulations." I stood among rooftop planters and rain-scattered pavement, seeing my mother and sister in the crowd behind the velvet rope. Orina Whitlaw and Trilby Koenig, two names that didn't move for me at the wedding, now dressed for the cameras. The crowd parted. I heard whispers. "She designed it, didn't she?" The recognition hit like a strike. Shock. My heart slid from confusion into a sharp clarity. This is the real game. Inside the meeting room I projected the prototype design of the building, the one I drafted from first sketch to construction. I looked the mayor in the eye. "I believe this project will be named after someone who shows up for it," I said plainly, "not someone who skips its opening." My sister sat in the back row, scrolling her phone. I caught her screen, pop-ups of her engagement shoot, tagged with at Koenig events. She clenched her jaw. I knew the trade now. My wedding date in the calendar screenshot, Smith baby shower, Saturday 2 p.m., they traded me away. I owned the design. They owned the absence. Their industry contacts, their social networks, their "we came" images. Every snapshot on Instagram filled with family members in cocktail dresses, not me. After the meeting I retreated to my office, the city skyline blurred through tinted glass. My email notification pinged. One subject line screamed out, "Payment approved. Mabrix Building Contract 4521. Attached was the calendar screenshot. Below it, a draft press release. Mayor Caldwell announces partnership with Koenig family, Mabrix design uncredited. I leaned back and stared at the document. They chose the gala. They chose nameplates and cocktail hour. I chose truth. My fingers hovered over send, as if the email itself carried weight. I thought about my grandmother's silver brooch, the little bird charm I'd carried for years. She used to say, "When you ignore a voice long enough, you'll forget how loud it can become." I clicked send. I left the office building with the envelope tucked under my arm. The evening wind tousled my hair. The city lights reflected off glass towers like evidence. I heard distant laughter from open windows. The world I knew had changed. I got the email just after lunch. My inbox pinged while I was in the studio, adjusting renderings. The subject line read, "Would you consider delivering a keynote at the city gala next month?" My first reaction, they skipped my wedding, now they want me on stage. I closed the message and waited a heartbeat, then opened it again. The calendar invite appeared like a minefield disguised as opportunity. I replied, "Yes, I'll speak." No celebration, no flourish, just words typed and sent. Keaton looked up from the sketches I'd spread across the table and raised his eyebrow. He knows me well enough to see this wasn't about recognition or applause. Later that evening I stood in front of the full-length mirror in our apartment, rehearsing my intro. I built this place. My name may not have been on the ribbon, but I built it. My reflection didn't wink back. I reminded myself. The spotlight was never my goal, but now I would use it. The following morning I left for coffee in downtown Asheville, my mind already cycling. I walked into the cafe and stopped short. There they were, Orina Whitlaw and Trilby Koenig, seated at a window table near the door, dressed in coordinated neutrals, holding up an invitation to the same gala. The barista overheard her mother say with a smile, "Oh, you're part of the Koenig Whitlaw crowd now." My heart clenched but not in surprise. They don't see me. They see the brand they built. I kept walking. Later I received a text from my sister, would be nice to walk in together. I stepped away from the window, thumb hovering before I answered, walk in separately. I realized then, I can be polite or I can be visible. I chose visibility. Back at the studio after hours, I stayed late while the shutters closed and the lights dimmed. I drafted slides tracing the building I designed, sketches, site plans, elevation models, all marked, Nova Mabrix. I rehearsed aloud. Achievement without acknowledgement is lost in someone else's narrative. On my phone I dialed my old mentor from grad school in Austin. He answered on the second ring. I said, bring your receipts. He didn't laugh. He just said, smart move. I leaned back, labeled digital folders, family invitations, email logs, calendar conflicts. My fingers hovered over delete or save. I saved. I ordered printed gala programs with subtle wording, featuring design by Nova Mabrix, principal architect. I wasn't preparing for revenge, I was preparing for truth. 2 days before the gala the invitation arrived in the mail. I held it in the dark hotel room where I rehearsed, reading the header aloud. Guests of honor, Orina Whitlaw and Trilby Koenig. Keynote speaker, Nova Mabrix, principal architect. My pulse skipped. I scribbled on the envelope, they skipped my wedding. They'll listen now. I leaned back into the velvet chair and clicked, reply. I look forward to walking in alone, but speaking for all of us. My phone dimmed. The game had shifted. I sat in the quiet of my home office after midnight, the glow of the laptop screen the only light around. I opened the folder labeled wedding data, emails, screenshots, and the calendar conflict, all filed and waiting. I had copied each message, each refusal, each silence into one place. I reviewed them again, invitations sent, unopened, RSVPs unfilled. Every one of them. I drafted the outline for the gala keynote. On slide 6, a simple title, Family Attendance 0%. I rehearsed aloud, acknowledgement isn't requested. It's earned. I sent a final email to my mentor. Subject line, ready when they are. The screen faded. My fingers lingered over the keyboard. I told Keaton, I'm not reacting. I'm projecting. He nodded, and we both knew this wasn't about anger anymore. This was about moving silently into action. On the night of the gala I stepped out into the crisp downtown air, flashing lights all around. My heels clicked on pavement as I walked up the red carpet. Cameras popped. I caught the whisper of my name, Nova Mabrix Architect. I reached the stage, took the microphone, and introduced myself. I'm Nova Mabrix, architect, partner, invited speaker. The room fell quiet. I clicked the slide. Family attendance 0%. Gasps. His mother's handshake wavered. My sister's smile froze mid-pose. I said, you can track absence. You cannot erase outcomes. The spotlight I never asked for now burned with intention. Cameras turned toward my mother and sister. I heard, didn't they skip her wedding? A text from Trilby appeared mid-speech. Stop this. I paused, let the silence stretch. I drafted a tweet right there. Let's talk presents. My colleague heard someone next to him ask his wife, she designed that? Surprise in his tone. My blood cooled. The shift was real. Backstage I was handed a sealed envelope by my sister. Her smile was perfunctory. Inside, a payment record showing my firm was never credited in the family trust. Quote, you made a move, she said, voice thin. Now you're in the arena. I leaned back, envelope in hand, calm. I didn't come here to play, I said quietly. I came to win. The lights dimmed as I left the room. The paper lay on my lap. My name beneath that contract, my name above the ribbon. I rose. The sun hadn't quite burned through the morning haze when I stepped out of the car and faced the entrance of the Mabrix building. It looked exactly how I'd drawn it years ago, before they put their names on top of mine, before they smiled into cameras and shook hands like they'd built it with their bare palms. The plaza was already filling. Dignitaries, journalists, cameras rolling. I could hear someone say, today's unveiling, biggest civic project this year. My heels clicked against the stone walkway I'd helped choose myself. Each step felt like a drumbeat of the years they tried to silence me. I caught the mayor's glance near the stage, then looked up toward the VIP section. My mother, Orina, in her winter cream coat, lips tight. Trilby beside her, arms crossed, watching like this was still her show. The mic was warm when I touched it. I steadied myself. Design isn't about being seen. It's about being felt, I began. Eyes locked. Silence. Then the screen behind me flickered to life. Footage played, from a family birthday years ago. There was my sister, laughing loud with a champagne flute, surrounded by guests. I stood in the corner, half lit, holding my own coat. No one looked at me. In the room now, gasps rippled outward. Orina's hand went to her pearls. I didn't flinch. I kept speaking. Some people choose guest lists over the guests themselves. Slide. Email logs. Each subject line. Invitation to Nova Maybrick's wedding. Beneath. Unread. Being forgotten isn't accidental. It's systemic. Silence again. But this time, it wasn't cold. It was charge. Later, after the applause, hesitant, then swelling, I stepped backstage into the corridor. Trilby stood waiting like she'd been rehearsing it all day. Her hair perfect. Her mouth tight. She didn't say hello, just handed over a tablet. A live poll on the Gala app. Whose design changed Asheville most? Her name, 65%. Mine, 21%. Her eyes dared me to react. I took the tablet, scrolled down. Comments were coming in fast. One stood out. Maybricks did the heavy lifting. Why didn't she speak sooner? I didn't hand it back. I smiled and said, thank you. I finally can. We didn't speak again. I walked out into the lobby where clusters of press and staff still mingled. An aide stepped toward me, envelope in hand, gold city seal pressed into the flap. He gave a small nod. I opened it slowly. Inside, an official revision of the project record. Maybrick's design listed as sole architect. Koenig legacy removed from contract 4521. My fingers tightened around the paper. I looked up. Cameras turned in my direction again. I saw Trilby across the room, her face pale. Orina's mouth was parted, still unreadable, like she couldn't process a world she didn't control. I let the envelope hang at my side and whispered, low but certain, they thought the arena was theirs. I came to take my place. The air outside the after-party buzzed like the tail end of a storm, alive with something you couldn't see, but everyone felt. I stepped back onto the red carpet, not with the same cautious breath I'd taken the first time, but with the clarity of someone who already knew how this chapter ended. The spotlights didn't matter anymore. The stares didn't sting. I wasn't walking in hoping for anything. I was reclaiming everything. Keaton stayed behind me, as he always did when he knew I needed that space. He didn't have to say it. I knew his eyes were on me, steady, proud, letting me lead. The LED screen flared behind me, and I didn't flinch. Maybrick's design, sole architect, contract 4521. It was printed in tall, bold text. I saw phones rise, flashes spark. But it was the phone in Trilby's hand that I caught first. She was recording. Of course she was. Their grip was slipping. They'd record anything that might buy it back. That quiet moment from the gala, when I revealed they hadn't shown up to my wedding, it wasn't a slide anymore. It was a wave. I watched it ripple across the crowd now. People glancing over at my mother and sister, whispering not so quietly. I raised my glass, just enough to be caught by the front row cameras. When you skip the wedding, I said evenly, don't be surprised when the launch opens without you. No one laughed. They didn't need to. The truth doesn't need applause. Later that evening, I returned to the suite set aside for speakers behind the stage. It was quiet, carpeted, full of uneaten cheese trays and someone's forgotten coat. I sat at the small table in the corner and opened the sealed envelope from the mayor's aide. It was exactly what I expected, and exactly what they never thought I'd get. The official city contract, signed and ready for public release. My firm, Maybrick's Design, listed solely. No mention of the Koenig name. Not as partner. Not as donor. Not as contributor. I pulled out my phone. Snapped a photo of the document against the soft lighting. I added my original building sketch beside it, just pencil lines, clean and honest. Captioned it simply. Recognition isn't handed out. It's earned. Uploaded. The reaction hit fast. Mentions started lighting up. Local outlets, architecture blogs, even a quote tweet from a city council member. I leaned back and exhaled. From the hallway, I caught a voice. Trilby. How did she get this? She sounded more confused than angry. That told me everything. I didn't move, just listened, then smiled. The game had flipped. Back in the hotel room, after the crowd thinned and the lights outside faded into street lamps, I sat by the window and scrolled through the evening's commentary. One stood out. Worked in the shadows, now shines. I sat there, thumb resting on the screen. I remembered the nights sketching designs no one asked for, nights choosing quiet because confrontation was too expensive. I reached for the tram con N, the little swallow hairpin that once belonged to my grandmother. It lay on the nightstand, a whisper of who she'd taught me to be. Your value isn't what they say it is, she'd said. It's what you keep building when no one watches. I called my team. We launch Monday, I told them. Make sure our mark is everywhere. We don't participate, we lead. They didn't respond with cheers. Just a calm, yes, ma'am, and that was enough. We were ready. As I was about to switch off the lights, the phone buzzed again. A message from the mayor's office. Press conference. Monday 10 a.m. You're invited. Guest of honor. For a second, I didn't move. My eyes traced the words slowly. Guest of honor. I stood still in the dark, holding the phone, and said softly to no one. They asked if I know who the mayor is. Turns out, he knows exactly who I am. The morning of the press conference, I woke up before the alarm. The light outside the hotel window stretched across the skyline like it was starting over too. I stayed in bed a moment longer, not from hesitation, just to feel what peace might be, if this was what it looked like. The city moved quietly below me. I wasn't chasing anyone's approval today. I was just showing up, on my own terms. Keaton stood by the desk, flipping through my notes. He didn't say much. He didn't need to, just slid the coffee mug closer and handed me my grandmother's journal. I opened it to the page she'd marked with a dried petal, a note in her fading cursive. If you're going to break the cycle, don't do it quietly. That stayed with me. I wore the same navy dress from my wedding. Not as some symbol of recycling pain, but as a statement. Same woman, but now, unreachable. A knock came at the door. The mayor's aide. You're scheduled in 15. I stood, and for the first time in months, my heart didn't pound. It didn't need to. The cameras were waiting when I stepped onto the stage. Lenses, recorders, journalists scribbling names they'd once ignored. I adjusted the mic, cleared my throat, and didn't flinch. I talked about the building. The vision, but only briefly. I pivoted to legacy, to absence, to the difference between being remembered and being respected. Family isn't just blood, I said. It's who shows up, especially when it's hard. I meant every word. From the corner of my eye, I saw movement in the back row. My mother, my sister, they sat stiff, eyes locked forward. I didn't slow. I didn't shift my tone. They had their silence when I needed them. Now it was mine. After the conference, while the room cleared, a woman approached. Older, weathered, familiar in a way that caught my breath. Aunt Nell? I asked before I could stop myself. She nodded. 15 years, she said. But I wasn't going to let today pass. Your grandmother would have been proud. She didn't hug me. She didn't need to. Her being there said enough. I nodded once, not to her. Not to anyone. But to the 17-year-old version of me who once cried into a cake no one showed up to cut. Later that afternoon, Keaton and I drove home. The road twisted back through the hills, and for most of it, I didn't say a word. I watched the trees blur past, the colors of October blushing in the breeze. He reached over once, rested his hand over mine. I didn't move it. When we got home, the driveway was quiet. I stepped out first. The sun had already begun to dip. The air carried a crispness that wrapped itself around my shoulders like an old memory. I checked the mailbox on instinct. Bills, flyers, and one letter. Handwritten, no return address, but I knew the handwriting before I even unfolded it. It was from my father. There were no apologies, just a photograph. Me, 5 years old, sitting beside him at a workbench. And a note scribbled on the back. She built more than buildings. She built walls that could stand. I didn't cry. I slid it into a file folder marked, kept. That was all it needed to be. Not a gesture of forgiveness. Not a reopening. Just something I knew now. Something filed where it belonged. That evening, I walked out to the garden alone. The oak tree rustled softly overhead, and the wind chimes danced with the breeze. I ran my fingers along the metal, then stepped back. "Grandma," I whispered, "we made it." I didn't say anything else. There's no single moment where healing announces itself. No spotlight, no music swell. It's quiet. It's slow. Sometimes it's just breathing differently than you did before. As I sat down at the edge of the porch, I pulled out my notebook. Not a sketch. Not a plan. Just a letter. To someone who didn't exist yet. Maybe would someday. "If ever you stand alone," I wrote, "remember, that's where foundations begin." And with that, I closed the notebook. Some stories don't end. They just build in another direction.